Okay. All right. Well, I think in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. So let's check back in with this afternoon's objectives. Excuse me. So we're really going to pick up where we left off this morning and dive into the tools. We'll briefly review the revised family intake. And then from there, we're going to start exploring the family profile, which is really going to build on the initial work that you did and provide more specific instructions and guidelines. We have a lot to cover this afternoon, and we've really tried to design a training that is interactive in a way that, regardless of your comfort speaking, you can engage your brain in the content. We'll keep the chat box open again for comments, and we will answer those if time permits. If not, we can circle back on the 14th when we have our second session. And again, we will stay on the call at the end. We would like to ensure that everyone complete the SurveyMonkey because your feedback really informs what we'll be delivering going forward. So we'll share that link with you then to finish, and you can stay on the call and informally ask questions, offer feedback, things like that. And then one of the last things we'll do today is, besides going through the family profile, we really want to give you an opportunity to reflect on what your practice is going to look like. We recognize this is a shift. We hope that in today and overall, you guys will recognize it just looks different on paper. This is really what you guys were already doing, but we really want to create a little bit of space for you guys to think about, how am I going to step into doing this work, and so reflect for action a little bit. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer in the family intake.
Great. Thanks, Mariah. So when Mariah and I visited with Regions back in the fall, last fall actually, one of the things we heard was an interest in simplifying the family intake. And as Mariah shared this morning, we heard how the intake and the level determination process were becoming more fluid and integrated, and were taking place across several conversations. So this gradual shift enabled us to re-envision the family intake with your partnership and the tools that support you in your work with families. So this revision process was truly collaborative. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who helped us refine the tool itself and got us here today. So the revised family intake now includes those items that reflect the information that you as care coordinators gather early in your relationship with families, and as you guys are getting to know each other and connecting and building that trust and that relationship. But I would first like to mention just a few changes since that 2016 version that we used to be using. So when we were reflecting on the order of things, we really wanted to build the family intake so it reflects the flow and the conversation that you have with families. And of course, using those open-ended questions, oftentimes the path of the conversation moves around quite a bit, but we hope that the family intake does now better mirror the flow of your conversation. As you've seen, that we brought the protective factors into the family intake on page 2 by grouping some of those questions. And ultimately, we hope this form is simpler and easier to use for you all. On CMEDS, we've combined the parent and child sections into one assessment that's entered under the child record. So hopefully that's a little bit easier to manage. And then we've shifted some of those items that emerge later in your conversations with families. We've shifted those from the family intake to the family profile. And like Mariah said, we're going to dig into that a little bit more this afternoon. So there are a couple of new things on the family intake. And most notably, and where our discussion will focus on for our activity, is around question number 7. Has the child seen a dental provider in the last 6 months? And then there's another new question. What is the initial recommendations by care coordinator? And so you'll have a chance in the family intake to note, based on your initial conversations and parents' primary concern, what do you think are those initial recommendations? So going on to the next slide, we're going to have an activity around question number 7, another one of our small group activities. And again, focusing on, has a child seen a dental provider in the last 6 months? So what we're going to ask you to do is we'll put you into your groups, and we'll spend about 10 minutes again. And if there's someone in your group that you don't know, please take a moment to introduce yourselves. Otherwise, you can jump right in. And we would like you as a group to consider, what might you learn from a family about their child's dental history that could inform recommendations and next steps? So kind of in the protective factors framework, what are some of the family's protective or risk factors that might be contributing to whether or not they've seen a dental provider in the last 6 months? So think about parental resilience, knowledge of parenting and child development, and social and emotional competence. And then lastly, do you have any follow-up questions that you might have for the family if they have a child over the age of 2 who still hasn't seen or had a dental visit or seen a dental provider? So we're going to break you into groups, and you'll be given another 1-minute warning, okay? See you in a few minutes.
Just as a note, I put the family intake into the chat box for those of you that don't have it.
Excellent. Thanks, Mariah. Okay, we'll see you in about 10 minutes, folks.
Brianna, did you need some help getting into your group?
I wonder if she stepped away for a moment.
Yeah. My son's school always sells shirts for because they usually do a huge Halloween carnival. And they've made a shirt, and it has like little skeleton hands on it and the name of the school, and then on the back it says "Trick or Treat from 6 feet."
That's really cute.
Yeah, I might have to get myself one of those.
I was like, we're probably not dressing up this year. I got everyone like t-shirts, like just from Old Navy, and mine says, "I came for the booze," and it's a ghost with a cocktail box.
Oh, there you go.
Good enough costume.
I know, right?
Yep.
Did you watch the debate, Megan?
Sorry, did you say something?
Oh, I was just wondering if you watched the debate.
I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to. So I just.
Hope you guys were able to have a nice conversation about this new question that we're asking. And I think it sounds like some of you already touched on this in your conversations, and now we're just giving you a place to record it on the family intake. So perhaps we can open it up, and if anyone would like to get us started on, you know, when you're thinking about some of the protective or risk factors, what came to your mind if you heard about someone's dental history, if they hadn't visited a dentist in the last 6 months? Maybe you can get us started, and you can unmute yourself.
In our group, we talked about the fact that maybe a lot of parents don't have the education to know that so early kids need to go to the dentist and that they're not really aware of it. So we talked about it being a great reminder. A lot of our group is already asking that question and referring to the oral health initiatives that we have. So that's something that we kind of already are having in place, talking about that and bringing awareness to the parents who we see it very common that they're not aware that it's important to take the kids so early to the dentist.
Thank you. So that kind of links to the knowledge of parenting and child development, that maybe they just don't have that understanding that it's important, as important as going to the medical doctor. Around parental resilience, did you guys have any thoughts around that protective factor, and what might be contributing to why they have or have not been able to visit a dental provider? I think my group mentioned something around that. We were talking about how it just may be one additional appointment, and like just adding one more thing to their, you know, long list of things to do just might not, it just might be overwhelming because they're already accessing HDS. So like under the parent's ability, here we have the parent's ability to manage appointments. You know, that's, can anyone else think of anything? I know, would someone like to share their small group discussion?
I can jump in about something our group mentioned, was actually just maybe like the resource of having dental insurance. Sometimes dental insurance is supplemental and it can be really expensive if you have to pay out of pocket. So some parents might just need some help connecting to some resources, some dental resources that they can actually afford, or to help get that covered.
Yes. Our group spoke about that too. And it's such a good point. You know, we don't necessarily have dental insurance. It can seem outside the realm of what's manageable. What about social emotional competence? What came to mind when you guys were thinking about that?
We touched on that in my group. If someone would want to speak up, talk about the child's confidence. Maybe Laura.
First, I was telling our group that maybe that child needs more self-confidence when he's talking, or maybe the lack or the missing pieces of the mouth, it won't let him talk very well, and it's affecting his speech or her speech. And also, I will add that I see immigrants, children that they recently come from another countries, they don't have it. And I assist those families to set up an appointment or go to the insurance to ask for provided list that they can go to. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Laura. Did anyone come up with some really nice open-ended questions that you might ask parents if you heard that they hadn't seen a a dentist in the last 6 months and the child was over 2, you know, getting a little bit older, what would be some nice MI informed way of approaching it? Do we have any of our MI gurus on the line?
And even if it's not MI informed, what are you curious about? What's on your mind when you know, we're giving you a teeny tidbit of a family story here. So what kind of pops up for you? What would you want to talk about on that next call, perhaps, to learn more?
I think we could kind of bring up, can you share with me the fears that you have for taking your child to the dentist? Like, you know, and just kind of touch on maybe the points of like the age or the behavior, or maybe the parent has had some bad experiences with the dentist.
Excellent.
Yes, I know I shared my own reluctance to go to the dentist, and so that it definitely impacts it. And so kind of building that trust and relationship with the family, they may be able to share with you a little bit more about what's motivating them or not motivating them to take that next step. Thank you guys for working through that that new question on the family intake. And again, you know, pop in the chat box any other questions you might have about the family intake. But I think what you'll find is that it's very similar to what you've been using. It's just we really hope to simplify it, and paired with how you're recording information on the family profile, which Mariah's going to get into right now. It really builds that whole picture of the family. So thank you. Thanks for participating.
Right. So now we're going to jump into the family profile overview. This is kind of a challenging training to prep for, because training on tools is not necessarily a lot of fun. So we've really tried to be thoughtful in a way to kind of allow you guys to engage with this information, because we don't anticipate that you're going to learn this tool overnight. And that was also part of why Jennifer sent out the scavenger hunt activity, so that you could get in and start to have your own questions and wonderings about this tool and how to use it. Today, we're going to walk through the tool and use some interactive functions for you to do more thinking. And we do encourage you, if you haven't yet completed the scavenger hunt, just to take that opportunity so you get more comfortable. Like we said, this is not really that different from what you were doing, but it's a different process. So it's probably going to feel new, and you're thinking, am I tracking this? Am I doing this? I think what's good about it, though, is that it's really a reflective process. So in the field of reflective practice, we talk about something reflecting on action. And so that's really going back in your mind and thinking about your experiences and what you've learned, and starting to wonder and make sense of what you're seeing, starting to create a picture or a vision in your head. And that's really the way this tool operates. And so that starts with the family intake. You're getting things in that family intake conversation that you're storing away, right? Some of it gets documented on a tool, but you're starting to create this visual picture of this whole family and this whole child. And it's not like there's a set time, like, you know, when we used to do the lift, you scored the lift and you had a score in the end in that moment. This is more looking back over multiple interactions and thinking about what you've heard and seen, you know, dialoguing with your peers and going back and having follow-up conversations with families to really put the whole picture together. And the same can be said, I think one very specific example on the tool is we do have a question on parental readiness. That's really an opportunity for your practice to reflect on what you have heard over the course of time to give you an idea, where is this parent and their readiness to engage, right? So that's going to be really helpful in knowing the amount of services to recommend, and knowing kind of how to support the family and their ability to engage in HDS. So it's not a right or wrong answer. It's a you really thinking, bringing together all that you've learned and thinking about, on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready do I think this parent is for this? So that's really kind of the frame of this tool, which I think is a bit different than the tools that we've used in the past. Is it's cumulative, it's reflective, it's not about rushing through the tool and getting all the checkboxes done. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. let me see. The other thing that I really like about this tool that shifts it from the feed a little bit is that it identifies opportunities to affirm on parental strengths. So as we know, affirmations, and we'll talk more about these pieces in the next training, but affirmations are a key component in the micro skills and motivational interviewing. And in order for parents to engage in HDS, they're going to need to feel competent and confident in what they're doing. And so we want to affirm the strengths that we see. And we were already doing that in practice. And we even had a small section of the feet where we really, focused in. But we really wanted to take it out of as if they were two separate things, because the way families work, strengths and risks, they go hand in hand. Families leverage the two to cope and to survive and to thrive in their current circumstances. And so you can really be shining the light pretty strategically for families on where their strengths lie. The tool also outlines risks that can be supported both within HDS and with external referrals. So again, really thinking about the cumulative risks, the cumulative strengths, and then making a very thoughtful decision about what you might recommend or offer this family, whether that's within HDS or external to HDS. And you now have a full picture to do that. And so knowing that each family is different. There might be a family that can handle 2 or 3 services at once, and they're like ready to go, right? And another family, you're going to have to take it very slow based on everything that you know that they're juggling. And then just kind of in summary, basically the tool is 24 items total, and it develops a picture of the whole family, the whole child. So it's a much broader view, and that's part of why when we looked at the process, we're really wrapping in kind of those initial service entry conversations, those case consultations that are making a much clearer picture of the barriers and also the strengths that families bring that can support them. And again, this is a support. This will be the trickier part, I think. So this is a support to your level determination process. The objective of this tool is not level determination. What we heard in the field, you guys are really determining level primarily on the level guidelines and clinical judgment. And you're pretty darn sophisticated about it. So what you'll see as we go through this, we don't want you to get stuck on someone has a level 3 characteristic and this means they're a level 3 family. This is about you reflecting on the cumulative picture and the need and what you know about HDS services and coming to a conclusion. So we'll walk through that and explain it a little bit more. But ultimately, the main objective of the family profile is to develop a whole family, whole child picture. And it supports many other things like level determination. All right. All right, so let's practice. Let's have a little fun. So this is kind of like Zoom Jeopardy, shall I say, but it's just a way that each one of you can kind of participate and think about what we're discussing. We're going to use polls. If you haven't used polls before, they're pretty simple, and more than anything, they are anonymous. So there is nothing wrong. If you don't have the right answer, that's not what this is about. This is about getting your brain's attention and having we're going to punch you a question and you're going to think about it. Think of error as opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to learn something you didn't know. So the family profile, so here's the scenario. Family profile is completed based on conversations and or observations with families and feedback from other team members, for example, a developmental specialist. So based on what you know and the work that you've done and what we've shared, would you say that's true or false? And Megan is going to pop up a poll for you to respond to. And like I said, totally anonymous. Nobody knows if you get it wrong. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
Thank you, Megan. All right, so it looks like about 77% of you believed that was true, and it is true. The family profile is completed based on conversations and or observations with families that you have made, and then feedback from other team members. And so if you go into the family profile manual, you'll see that broken down pretty clearly. Okay. Let's see, then the next one. Then the next one, the completion date of the family profile is the first time you enter any information into the tool. Is that true or false? 80% voted. All right, so there we got false, or we have the majority, 77% of you believed that was false, and that is correct. It is false. The family profile is a living document, and it's based on multiple interactions with families, not just one point in time. And CMEDS is actually going to function similarly to the collaborative HAP in that you can shift information until you've determined the level and actually marked the family profile complete. The date it's complete is the date that the family is determined to be level 2 or level 3, or that level is assigned. And that is likely, based on the process that we outlined, going to be after the development assessment or within a few sessions of engagement. And we'll really get, in the spring, we're going to come together as a group and really look at all the data that we have on the family profile and really find out what's working and where we need to make shifts. And so we'll start to get a clearer picture of the leveling process and how the timing and the process that it goes through. And then I would just add a bonus question. So here's a bonus question. A family has missed multiple sessions and needs more support. You want to increase them from level 2 to level 3. Do you revise the family profile? Go ahead and pop your thought. Oh, and I know this one's not anonymous, so if you feel comfortable, put your answer in the chat. Can you revise the family's level in the family profile? Yes. Yes. Excellent. Yes, you can. There is a specific question that allows you to go in and say that you have revised the family's level. Because again, this isn't about did you get it right. This is about the process and us understanding how we're meeting families' needs and having some clearer numbers on families who have more needs and those that don't, because that can really inform our ability to support you guys and our ability to think about additional supports that families in our community need. Right. Okay, so I'm going to pass it back over. Oh, actually, no, I'm going to pass it to the break. So let's take our 3-minute break. We're almost halfway through, and then we'll come back. Hoo, 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 hoo. Breathe in. Hoo, 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 hoo. Okay, I'm going to flip it real quick. So I always want to try to integrate both hemispheres. Start over here, breathe in. Hoo, 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 hoo. Back one more time. Hoo, hoo, hoo. I feel a little silly doing my owl sound to myself on the mic there. All right, so I know I heard my neck pop, and hopefully some of you guys did too. That actually is meant to, this is the area where we carry the most tension. So it's meant to kind of trip that up and activate it a little bit, open it up, get that cerebral spinal fluid flowing again, so our brain can connect back with our bodies. And if you like those kind of things, I don't take credit for creating any of these. This is the Brain Gym. I'll pop a little reference in the chat box for you. There's lots of different practices you can use from them that are pretty easy and fun for kids too. Let me just pop that in the chat. I'll pop this for Jennifer, and then I'll put that in the chat. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, those mini breaks throughout the day, especially when we're doing a lot of Zoom calls, and then especially with a training situation like this, they're super helpful. And I love that one. And you didn't sound silly at all, Mariah. I appreciate you got that pitch, the owl pitch, just fine. So
it's a hard pitch to follow.
So thank you. So diving a little bit deeper into the family profile, I guess just starting simply, you know, it starts with the family. So we thought it might be nice to take a case-based approach and scenario and walk through each of the protective factor domains, and as we learn a little bit more about this family, see how it informs our whole picture of that family. And you'll still have a chance to, you know, chat in the chat box, and we're going to be doing lots of polling in this activity, so you'll get your mouse all warmed up. And so what I'd like to do first is just read through this scenario. So you're working with a new family. Mom, Patty, is the primary caregiver. She has 2 children. And she's concerned about her youngest daughter, Maria, who's 2.5. So Maria gets frustrated easily and is having a lot of tantrums. So that's the information we're starting with. And sometimes that's all you get in that, first referral from an agency, or they self-refer. They just saw the advertisement, they want to call and they need help from HDS. So Mariah, if you could advance the slide. So what we're going to do is dig into each of the protective factors, starting with parental resilience. And so as you guys are getting pretty good at this now, parental resilience is managing stress and functioning well when faced with challenges, adversity, and trauma. And so on the family profile, we have about 4 questions devoted to this domain. And they're the navigating systems of care, ability to attend HDS appointments, behavioral health concerns or history of that concern and whether or not your caregiver is currently getting treatment for that, and then a trauma history. So with that in mind, let's see if we know, if you advance the slide, we're going to learn a little bit more about this family. So the scenario is, during the family intake, Mom tells you she has a full-time job and can never get time off of work. Based on this information, you anticipate Mom having barriers to, and then thank you, Megan, for popping up the poll. So go ahead and complete that. Does Mom have challenges resulting in navigation issues or attendance issues? Great. So it looks like 100% responded that it would be attending appointments that she would have challenges with. And so one other thing we would like, when you hear this information from Mom, what else would you like to know from her? How can we better support her in building her parental resilience? And so please use the chat box. I'd like you guys just to take a moment and put in the chat box, what's another question you might have for Mom when she shared this information with you?
I'm also popping in the family profile in the chat box for those that need it.
Okay. So feel free to use the chat box. I do hear from Laura shares that she may have you might ask about if she has any recent changes in the family, or if she has some of her own concerns. I would ask about other support systems that she might have to lean on in order to get to the appointments. That's great. Yeah, it's all about figuring out what might help Mom in that moment and exploring with her what the opportunities might be. Oh, great. I'm so glad you guys are jumping in. Is there any other caregivers that can attend the services with the child? Is there a dad or a partner that might be able to help? Is she interested in pursuing, how interested? What's her motivation? How interested is she in pursuing developmental services for her child? And I like what Nancy says, just brainstorm ideas with the parent about possible times that she may be able to attend an appointment. Because I know some of you folks have some flexibility, and especially now with, so we're in a whole new world now with teleservices. And I've heard from the field that it just may be a little bit, for those folks who are either have live far away or have scheduling problems, that teleservices has really provided a unique opportunity. And Devin says virtual service. Oh, there you go. I think we're, so that was great, Devin, about the virtual services. So thank you guys. And yeah, I love, sometimes the chat box takes on a life of its own, and we love that because we hold on to that, and it can help, for future trainings and for future resources as we continue to work together. Okay, thank you guys. Let's move on to the next protective factor. Social and emotional competence. So, and this is family and child interactions that help children develop the ability to communicate clearly, recognize and regulate their emotions, and establish and maintain relationships. And if I could pause for a moment, these definitions that I'm reading are from the Center for the Study of Social Policy, who created the Strengthening Families framework and put together the protective factors that we're working with today. And we got those referenced in the PowerPoint, but a lot of this is through this evidence-informed approach, and as Mariah mentioned earlier today, about preventing child abuse and neglect, supporting child development, and then creating those connections with families. So thank you. I just wanted to make sure I reference back to our source material. So when we're looking at social and emotional competence, our family profile has 4 different questions devoted to this domain around co-parenting, supporting a child's emotional experience, encouraging opportunities for the child to develop social skills, and the parent's ability to manage the child's behavior. So again, you're going to be hearing a lot about all different pieces of this as you have these conversations with mom. And so let's go to the next slide and learn a little bit more about mom's situation. So the scenario is, during the same conversation, Patty states that she and her husband sometimes disagree on what to do when Maria throws herself on the ground kicking and screaming. What might this suggest about their co-parenting situation? And so we're going to have a poll. You'll have an opportunity to select a strength of collaborative, whether it's or inconsistent or conflicting. So we'll just take a moment. Great. So it looks like the majority of you selected level 3 conflicting, and then we had a close second on inconsistent. And so this is where you may want to, if you're working with a family, you might want to refer back to the family profile manual, because we realize some of the word need a little bit more definition. And so in this situation, I might think it might be more around the inconsistent, because when we talk about level 3 conflict between co-parenting caregivers, that's when there might start to be some custody issues or even a history of intimate partner violence. And but I think given that, what might be some more questions you might have for mom around this? Because I think, but trying to understand what is the level of discord in the family. And so how might you better understand the situation so you could have a clearer view of this? So if you guys wouldn't mind popping in the chat box, what else would you like to know from mom around her co-parenting situation so that you can have a better perspective on what she's facing? Are there cultural differences in the family? Yes, trying to understand what's at play with the family structure. And Mariah's putting in the manual. Oh, I love that. What do you and your husband do when you disagree? That could really give you some insight as to how they manage disagreements, and if it's a safe situation. Is the child with both parents or 50-50 custody? Good question. I think in our scenario, they're both co-parenting full-time, but that's a great follow-up question. What does it look like when they disagree? And I like, Diana, you're reflecting to mom, you sometimes disagree, so what does it look like? Where do they connect? Where do they agree? I love that reframe. And what are the coping skills of the family? Yes, you're right. It's how does each parent deal with their behavior? Because it doesn't say who's more strict or not. It says that they disagree about how to handle Maria's kicking and screaming, but we don't know who's maybe more restrictive or who's more has a more stricter approach to that. So thank you.
I would just add to this one, if you look in the manual as well, I think a term that we use in the manual is gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is really common in co-parenting homes, whether that's between mom and dad, mom and maternal grandmother, and it's really this idea, attitudes and behaviors that any primary caregiver that affects the quality of the other parent-child's relationship and or level of involvement. So one that, you know, is a common one that I know that I did was diaper changes, right? Like sometimes mom won't let dad change a diaper because, oh, he doesn't do it the right way, right? And so we create kind of these barriers and these boundaries that tend to put us on different pages as parents. And again, if it's multi-generational, this might come up even more. And we know that that results in inconsistent parenting for a child. And discord in the relationship, which again impacts the child. So just some things to think about to expand on the definition a little bit.
Yes, and I really appreciate the follow-up questions, because in this case it was very split between that inconsistent and conflict, and I think that just shows that it is a nuanced. This is not necessarily a science. This is like your clinical judgment and working with the family and getting a sense of where they're coming from and building that trust so that they share more, so that you can really understand what their challenges and their strengths are. So I think this particularly points out that aspect of it. If we can move to the next protective factor is knowledge of parenting and child development. So on the family profile, we do have about 3 questions devoted to this around caregivers' motivation to learn, their age-appropriate expectations of their child, and the child's daily routines. So with that in mind, we'd like to move to the next scenario. And that is, so in a follow-up conversation, Patty mentions Maria isn't talking a lot. Patty really wants help with Maria's behavior and doesn't understand the need for a development assessment. Mom is asking a lot of questions and seems a little curious. So what does this tell you about her motivation to learn and her expectations of her child? So we actually have a 2-phased quiz, or poll, should I say. The first one is around motivation. So if you guys wouldn't mind taking a moment. Okay, responses are still coming in. Okay, great. So the majority of your responses were that she is motivated to learn, and that's correct. I think just listening for those cues of, you know, she's curious, she's open, and she wants to learn. So I think that's spot on. The second poll is around age-appropriate expectations.
Jennifer, I just wanted to add on the ambivalence piece, because I know some people don't use that language. That's language from motivational interviewing, and that's kind of feeling 2 ways. And so I do think that there was some of that language in here too. So I see where people went with that, because Patty really wants help with Maria's behavior and doesn't understand the need for a development assessment. So I heard some ambivalence in that, right? Like she's kind of looking. So on the one hand, she's curious and wants to learn more, but on the other hand, she's very hyper-focused on the behavior. And she's like, why do I have to give you guys a developmental assessment? So I would say that both of those answers kind of got at that piece.
Thanks, Mariah. Yes, it's, and that's where our follow-up questions are super important, just to better understand mom. Mm-hmm. So the second phase of this is she's shared that, so her, as a reminder, Maria is 2.5 and isn't really talking a lot, but she doesn't understand the need for a development assessment for her daughter. So what does this tell you about her expectations of her child's development? Okay, it looks like the polling has slowed down. So 65% of you stated that you felt her expectations were unrealistic. And then about equal amounts said age appropriate or inappropriate. So when we look at the Family Profile Manual, it really talks about unrealistic expectations related to lacking knowledge about development milestones and the age appropriate play, and expectations may be due to lack of exposure to other children or parental education. Versus for the inappropriate, a little higher level of need would be that the parent might expect the child to perform above or below typical development, but this is also paired with causing the child and or the parent stress, or even has the potential for physical or emotional harm. So there may be an opportunity to ask some more questions of mom to get a better sense. So for this, I agree it would be unrealistic, but for those folks that chose either age appropriate expectations or inappropriate, it might be just some of those follow-up questions that might get you a clear vision of what's going on at the home. So with that, what else would you like to know from mom when you heard this little scenario about Maria not talking and around? So I'll pause, and if you guys wanted to populate the chat box again. What else would you like to know from mom as a follow-up? So we know that Maria is the youngest child. She's 2.5, and she has another sibling who's older. So there might be something there. Okay. But thanks, Mariah. Well, I might wonder if she's involved in any play groups, or has mom been interacting with other peers? Let's see. Got the chat box is going now. How does Maria communicate when she doesn't have the words? Do you see any patterns for the behavior concerns? Great. And this will, yeah, those sorts of questions will help you get at what recommendations you'll eventually be making for the parents.
I really liked Lauren's. Does she see any connection between tantrums and frustrations with communication? So this would be a decisional balance question, a motivational interview. So on the one hand, you know, you're seeing a lot of tantruming and frustrations. On the other hand, you know, you feel like the communication's okay. Like, kind of what do you think's the connection there, right? So really kind of highlighting, that's a double-sided reflection in a way. So yeah, I think that's a pretty powerful piece to offer mom, to highlight both perspectives that she shared with you.
Yes. And let's see. Any changes to childcare when mother started to work? Yeah, just understanding if this might be linked to anything else. But I think that, as we know in development, oftentimes that inability to communicate can lead to frustration. So kind of bringing mom along to try and understand what her child's behavior might be telling her, because it really is, it's her way, it's Maria's way of communicating, right? So thank you, Lauren and others, for pointing that out. Okay, we can move on to the next protective factor, concrete supports. And this is, you'll see that on the family profile, this is a little bit larger section than I think before. We were just kind of talking about basic needs, but we've built this section out to try and capture some other ways that may contribute to providing concrete supports to families. We've got about 7 questions related to this on the family profile around language, transportation, basic needs, housing, employment, education, and the medical home, and well-child visits, and whether or not they're up to date with their vaccinations. So we're going to and go to the next slide, and this is another poll for you guys. So in a follow-up phone call, Patty mentions that she's got her high school diploma. So based on this information, is this considered a strength or a risk factor? Great. Okay, that was a quick one. So 96% of you responded that it's a strength, and and this is where, when we're building the whole complete profile, we're considering the spectrum, or should I say the range of education. And so on the family profile, the strength is, we've categorized it more around a college diploma, and then more moderate or level 2 risk would be high school diploma, and then level 3 risk would be around if they haven't finished their high school education, or if there's illiteracy. So this is a tough one, and I can recognize how, out the gate it may seem like, oh yeah, this is definitely a strength, and in many ways it is. But what we have recognized with the research is that a mother's education plays a key role in her child's future achievement. And what the research has said is that it consistently shows that there's a strong relationship between maternal education and child well-being. And so although completing her diploma is awesome, and I think we would like to recognize it at that, the research shows that it may speak to potential other vulnerabilities that she may have around just accessing, navigating complex systems. But again, not one risk or protective factor is viewed alone. So this is really this contributes to the whole picture. And I actually would like to invite Mariah, if you want to add anything on this issue.
No, I think what you said covers it, and we'll hit on it a little more in a moment. But just overall, that there's a pretty strong body of evidence to support that maternal educational attainment is highly correlated with health and well-being for children, and so it's just something that we want to have on our radar. And we know that by the facet of a parent has a college education, their child already has more of an upward trajectory. It doesn't mean it's a destiny, right? But we just want to be aware of that.
And again, this one piece won't necessarily be the one that tips the scale, but I think it's part of the whole picture. Like when you're looking at a mom or a family's ability to engage in services, navigate complex systems, and process the various challenges along the way. So let's see. So we're moving on. Oh, I guess the one other thing we still wanted to have, what else would you like to know from mom around concrete supports in times of need, or in this particular question? Feel free to put in the chat box.
I think maybe I'll move us along, Jennifer, because we're
Okay.
a few minutes behind.
Okay, that's fine. So on the social connections, that's our last protective factor. And that is, we've got 2 questions on the family profile around mom or caregiver of support system and relationship with HDS providers. So moving on to our poll. So Patty has been sharing a lot with you lately. She still lives in the same neighborhood where she grew up, and she has a lot of friends from high school still. But unfortunately, most of her family has moved away. Based on this information, Patty's support system is a strength or a risk? Great. So 75% of you responded that Patty's support system is a strength. And a handful of you saw it as a risk. And I guess what's awesome about this situation for Patty is that even though she, her family has moved away, it sounds like she's really connected to her high school friends still. And so when we look at a strength, that means the caregiver has, multiple people to turn to in times of crisis or need, whereas more of the risk might be if she only has 1 to 2 or perhaps no one to go to. So I think Patty's in pretty good stead here, but what are some other questions that you might have for mom when she tells you the story about the fact that her family's moved away? And actually let me know, Mariah, how we're doing on time if we need to just move forward.
Yeah, if nothing's popping up in the chat, I think we need to move forward just so we can give people time to work together.
Cool. Thank you, guys. So now you've had a few conversations with Patty. You're learning about her family and their strengths and risk factors. You're starting to really be able to build the family profile and step back to see how her strengths and risks balance each other out. So let's visit what we've learned about so far. So attending appointments, whether or not that was a risk or a protective factor.
Oh, whoops, sorry.
That's okay. I should have called. So we're doing something fancy. We're doing some animation slides here. So, the first one is attending appointments. So that is considered a slight risk because of her job. But you guys had a lot of ideas on how to engage her and kind of problem solve around that. Co-parenting, whether it's a risk or a protective factor. So right now since it's, we did consider that like a level 2 risk. Again, we're building the whole profile though. For mom's motivation to learn, that's a protective factor. and her expectations of the child's development is considered a little bit of a risk. There seems like there's some opportunity to bring her along and ask some questions that might help her understand the linkage between her child's tantrums and the speech delay or the speech concern. And then education and support system. So you could see now, we've gone through this scenario where we've identified several strengths and risk factors, but that's not the end of the story, because you're still in the middle talking with mom. So there's lots more conversations that you're to have, but at this point, what level of care coordination might be appropriate based on this information? And you guys can put that in the chat box. And is there more you still would like to know? Some of you are saying 2, level 2. Yeah, I think that based on mom's motivation and support system, that in taking the whole picture, that you're on the right track. And so that might be what you, and Mariah's going to take us through the next section, but that might be what you initially select as her level. But there might be some more questions that you still want to ask. So, because as we know, this family profile conversation takes place over several, or should I say, it takes place over several conversations and not just one and done. And you're consulting with her providers. Maybe she's already engaged in that development assessment. So it is a nice, fluid, integrated process. So thank you. So Mariah is going to kind of go through the rest of the family profile with you, because there's a few extra questions that might help you make this determination.
All right, so just to wrap us up, there's a couple additional items beside the ones that we've gone through. And so the final sections of the family profile include a section, question 21 is additional potential level 3 indicators. And I want to really highlight the word potential, because there is no one indicator here that indicates level 3. This is, again, your clinical judgment and the balancing of the risk and protective factors. And that includes multiple children with development and behavior concerns, which you can imagine how that impacts multiple things. Recent immigrant, so new, acclimating to the country, not familiar with systems. A caregiver who is equal than or less to 21 years of age. And then perhaps a parent with a developmental and or intellectual disability. So they're going to have a more difficult time understanding the processes and the system and recommendations. And then a child who has experienced a loss or separation. So really thinking about a pretty traumatic experience for a child is to lose a primary caregiver, whether that be deployment, deportation, death, divorce, really thinking about how that's impacting the child. And so for one child, that might not be an impact, but you're going to learn from the family how much that's impacting the child and the family unit. And then the other section is the referral source, question 22. So again, these are some common referring parties: DSEP, CWS, so child welfare, public health nurses, and First 5 First Steps. And they typically indicate one of two things. One, there's a chance that this source ensures that the family has extra support and or additional case management. So it may be that they need even less support than they typically would. On the other hand, it can highlight that you're going to need to have open communication with this provider, which in turn may end up taking more time, but will result in greater impact on the uptake of interventions. So you're really going to weigh that based on your relationship with the referring party and your communications, and decide if this is really, is this something that's going to require more support, or is this something that is going to be a benefit to the family? And so that makes me think, an example that I was thinking of when I went through this would be a teen parent from First Steps. First Steps is going to provide a lot of supports. At the same time, some of the teens that they're supporting are really still going to need, based on the nature of the relationship and the funding stream in First Steps, they're still going to need a lot of partnership with the HDS provider in order to bridge that service. So just always trying to figure out what's going to work best for families, and it may be different for each one. And then finally, the final questions are question 23 and 24, and that's level determination. So that's really where you determine the level of the family. CC level is at the family profile completion. So it may be exactly the same and there's no right or wrong answer. But this question, number 24, will be important when we look in April. So this is what I mentioned earlier about shifting the level. So you may find we determined at this point that Patty is a level 2, but perhaps we find out something as she's in services that lets us know that really Patty is a level 3, or needs to be downgraded to a level 1. So that's what this is for, just so we can start to paint a picture of how frequently families are moving in and out of levels. It's not a right or wrong type of question. Okay. So here's one final poll for you. If a family has any level 3 characteristics, they will automatically receive level 3 care coordination. Is that true or false? Keyword here is any level 3 characteristics. That looks pretty good. I think we can end. So the answer is false. Just because a family has some level 3 characteristics, that doesn't necessarily mean they need to be a level 3. Just as you guys were doing prior to this tool, you're really weighing the risks and the protective factors. And so just because a family appears to have a level 3 need, that might not, when you balance the risk and protective factors, be the level that you assign. So it's definitely not that black and white. And just because you have a family that has some level 3 characteristics, that does not automatically mean they're a level 3. And we'll hope to refine this more over the coming year, but just know that it's not that black and white. You're really using your clinical judgment and working with your team to come to that level determination. All right, so we are quite short on time. Megan, were you able to reduce the group size so that maybe they have a moment to talk about their next steps?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to briefly put you in groups, and Megan made the groups smaller so you'd have a little more opportunity to talk. So I just really want you guys to reflect for action, these next steps that you're taking. What do I need to do? And I would really probably only focus on this first one since our time is short, but what do I need to do next in my own learning process to feel prepared? So just talk in your groups about that. What are going to be your next processes as an adult learner to really engage in the profile and to get yourself comfortable with the new tool? And we're going to give you guys 5 minutes for this one.
I'm going to hang out here. I'm so sorry I got so, that my section took so much longer. I mean, I definitely did not see how I was sucking up time. So my apologies.
All right, it looks like almost everybody is back, so we'll go ahead and wrap up for the day. So hopefully that was at least a brief opportunity to start to do some intention setting and really think about what you need to move forward in this process. And we will invite you to communicate with us via chat or stay on after the call if you have another question. But for right now, I'm just going to finish moving us through these pieces. So just to kind of outline some of the supports that you have going forward. So obviously you have your tools, the revised family intake and the family profile. We also have the family profile manual, which I encourage you to just kind of keep at your side as you're learning this tool, and remembering you don't need to have an answer that first time. You can look at it, come back to it. It's not a race to get the tool finished. It's really getting to understand the picture, and then you can consult the manual to dig a little bit deeper. And then the HDS Care Coordination Data Dictionary will be out any day now, and that will support teams getting this into CMEDS. And then last but not least, the approach. So we are releasing a document today. It's actually already up on the archive. Family-Centered Conversation Starters, Assessing Family Risk and Protective Factors. So this is really, this document outlines using motivational interviewing adherent questions, some of which come from the Strengthening Families network, and that will really give you some broad questions to use for both conducting the family intake and the family profile, and exploring these areas with families. I think most of these, I saw this in the chat box, are really areas where you guys are comfortable asking questions, but this might give you some food for thought. And our next training will really spend more time talking about the approach to these conversations.
I see a question from Sally where we can find the document that you're just mentioning.
Yes, I will pop it in the chat box right now, Sally, and it's also on the archive.
It is right now it's listed under, if I remember correctly, it's under the Care Coordination Training Materials, under the Provider Resources page. Yes. Great.
Yeah. Did you want to wrap us up, Jennifer?
I'm so sorry. You advanced the slide. This is my cue. Okay, so folks, I'm going to put in the chat box right now the feedback survey. We would really appreciate it if you could spend a few moments right now to complete it. The link's in the box. And then we're going to see you again on October 14th. And we're going to do very similar 90-minute session in the morning and a 90-minute session in the afternoon. And we'll be focusing on the review of the family-centered communication strategies, that document that we just released today, and then do a lot of peer learning, because you will have at least a handful of days underneath your belt when you've been giving this a try and this approach. So we're really hoping to structure lots of peer learning and conversation around best practices and what's your experience has been in those first week or so of using the new family intake and the family profile. So thank you guys so much, and stay on if you can. We're going to be here for a few minutes taking your questions, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. And our door is always open, so please let Mariah and I know if you have any questions after today's training or as you're navigating through the materials.